but you learn different things. I worked for NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and I had people with PhDs in computer science that could not figure out how to use their desktop. They could figure out how the information flowed around and how the supercomputer sliced it up and how to take big computations and slice it into smaller ones so we could run parts of the simulation on smaller machines. But they could not figure out, like this one guy said, there's something wrong with my mouse, it keeps going in the wrong direction. He twisted it upside down, and that's all. But he couldn't figure out how to fix it. So, you know, it's...
Yep, that's me, and that's refreshing that you share all those stories.
Well, that's what I mean. That's also one of the things about that I get from a user group. I hear the problems that people have, and I think, I hadn't thought of that. Like somebody was having trouble with their, they said, I know I can do this on my desktop machine, but I haven't figured out how to do it on my laptop. And I don't remember what the problem was, but I thought about it and thought, I don't know how to do that either. So I had to go look. So it's just something that never occurred to me. And it turned out to not be that difficult, but it's just not. I learned things from people asking questions, as well as hopefully they learned something from me from things that I point out. So it's a bi-directional.
Yeah, that
thing.
you know, and we're learning from. Yes.
A couple of months ago, we had a program on your favorite applications, and people brought, you know, they talked about applications that they thought were really cool. Most of the ones that people talked about, I wasn't familiar with. Like there were people, we have a bunch of apparently really avid birders who talked about these this on-phone encyclopedia of birds and pictures of birds and sounds of birds, and a whole bunch of astronomy apps. And they talked about something that was called Peak Finder or something. You point your phone at the skyline, and it will tell you what that mountain peak is and how tall it is.
Oh, the peaks. I got it.
And just all kinds of things that I
Peak
was
Finder.
not familiar with. And I thought it was a wonderful program because I didn't know this stuff. So I learned things too. Any questions anyone have?
Yes. Is there a way to get, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Bonita. Is there a way to get DVDs to the computer and onto iCloud to store?
Not if it's a copyrighted DVD, the answer is no. If it's a regular DVD and you have a disk drive, the way to do that is to what's called rip the DVD. Actually, you can put copyrighted DVDs in the cloud. It's just not legal. But there are programs called rippers that will rip the contents of the DVD and save it as a video file, and then you upload the video file. I would do this for things like the science agency I was with. We would produce videos on the life cycle of a whale, or what does riptide, what is a riptide and how to avoid them, and so on and so forth. We'd make these DVDs. Well, when people started streaming stuff, we suddenly had a need to produce videos that people could stream over the web. And the easy way to do that was just to rip our own DVDs and put the video portion up on the cloud. And a regular an hour-long DVD that you rip is probably going to take 600 to 800 megabytes of space by the time it's compressed and everything. But it that's for about an hour-long DVD, and a one that's 2 hours would be twice that. But what you need for that is called a DVD ripper. The most famous one is one that's called Handbrake, but Handbrake will not work on encrypted DVDs, and encrypted DVDs are the commercial ones that you buy. And you don't ever want to rip a Blu-ray DVD because they're not only encrypted, but if you rip them, they're about 25 gigabytes in size. They're really huge. They have a just unbelievable amount of information on a Blu-ray.
So they're
DVD.
really eating up your storage, right?
If you take one homemade DVD that's got an hour-long movie and you put it up on the web, it's going to be 600 megabytes. And if you've got like a 5 gigabyte plan, that's going to use up a big chunk right off the bat. If
Yeah,
you have,
a lot of old, they're instructional things, for my hobbies and things like that. And I just thought, oh, I get rid of all these DVDs and
you can put them on the web, but another way that you can do is just stick them on thumb drives. This thumb drive right here, I got from Amazon. It's got a USB-C connector on one end, and you run this little slider on it, and it's got a USB A connector on the other end, the old-fashioned USB connector. And this one holds 125 gigs, something like that. 128. Well, Kathleen says 128. She gets the bill, so she remembers this. But if you take 128 gigs divided by 600 megabytes divided into 128, you can get a lot of video onto just one of these. And the nice thing about these is if you have a safe deposit box or something, you want to store a bunch of this stuff away from your house so that if something happens, they're preserved. Just put them on DVDs. I recommend this to people they have all these photo collections of their grandchildren and so on and so forth, and they're afraid what would happen if their computer dies. Put it onto one of these large capacity USB drives and go stick it in your bank vault. And I'm not going to talk to you. I think my alma mater is asking me for a donation. But these USB drives, the first USB drive I ever saw was 1 megabyte. And you might think, well, that was useless. Well, at the time, a floppy drive, a Mac floppy drive held 800K. So 1 megabyte was actually an improvement. And transferring things to and from the USB drive was faster than from a floppy. So that was just great. The trouble was that the USB drive was like $30, and it was not economically feasible. But this cost me like, I don't know, $40-50 for 128 gigs. I
always was leery of things like that because I thought, okay, I get them and I don't know what's on them.
Well, a lot of them are designed so that you can write with a marking pen on them. So you can say, like Christmas stories or whatever it is. And again, and just after you're done with it, just stick it in the bank or stick it in a drawer or something like that. The US Navy, I can't remember what they call it, but it's their public affairs group in Bowling Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. They store it on SD cards. A lot of Mac computers have an SD card drive, and this one is 64 gigs. So this is half the size of this USB drive that I had, but it takes up even less space. And again, a lot of these are designed with labels on it that you can just write right on them. And these come up to a terabyte in size, which is the hard drive in your computer might not be that big. So the terabyte ones are expensive, but I'm just saying they're physically the same size, and you can just, I've got 3 of them stacked here, and they total, that's 750 gigs of space right there in that amount of space. And most of that is just the carrier. The drives themselves are very thin. So it's a great way to compactly store. The original SD cards, when they first came out, they were again about 1 megabyte in size. They were not very reliable. You'd use them for, a month or two and they'd stop working. The modern ones though, it's been years since I had one fail. So they're very reliable. They don't need electricity when they're sitting in a vault or in a drawer in your house. It's a great way to store things offline.
And the modern computers have a slot for those, or?
A lot of the laptops do, like the MacBook Pros usually have, there's a thin slot along the side that you can just stick an SD card in. And my Mac Studio's got a slot for an SD card. And if you don't happen to have one of those handy dandy slots, you can get
Does the MacBook Air, the new ones, have it? Do you know?
the Airs may not, the MacBook Pros, but I think the Airs, I've never actually played with a 15-inch, the new MacBook 15-inch, but the smaller MacBook Airs I know do not have it. But even then, they do have USB-C drives that you can plug these things in. And there's our adapters, they're called docks. You can get an adapter from like 20 bucks from Amazon. And I would show you mine, except that well, no, actually, this one's not being used. So I can use this one. This is a dock that I bought because somebody gave me a compact flash card. And a compact flash is way older than SD cards and much larger. And I had no way to read it because I haven't seen one in like 20 years. But this is a dock that I got off of Amazon for like 25 bucks. And it has compact flash, which nobody in their right mind uses, has SD card slot. It's got this kind of thing that Sony had and only Sony had. It's got like 5 different adapters on it, and it costs like 20 bucks. So even if you don't have one, you can get one fairly easily. And some of the adapters also have an Ethernet connection because a MacBook Air does not have an Ethernet connection. So if you need an Ethernet connection, you can just use that with the MacBook Air to plug it into Ethernet. And they've got HDMI. So if you want to plug in a large screen into your MacBook Air, it doesn't have a way to do that. Buy this dock and plug in your HDMI cable into it, and you can have an external flat screen with your MacBook Air and all kinds of things. And they're not that expensive. Just type into Amazon, you want a USB-C dock if it's one of the newer machines that has USB-C, and you'll just see a page after page after page of an as a guide to buying one of those on Amazon. You probably won't know what you're doing, but other people have bought these, and the trick is to look for ones that are highly rated. Amazon will show them in terms of who is sponsored. So if somebody pays for a higher position, they get the higher position. But if you click on the little thing over there where it says how they're sorted, you can say by highest rated, and the ones that are highest rated by users will be at the top. And you want to be a little bit special, be careful about the reviews, because a lot of people, particularly some manufacturers, will pay for good reviews. So you want to find something that's had like 300, 400, 500 reviews, because manufacturers do not pay 300 people to write a positive review of a $20 device. But that's usually how to tell the best ones. There's a company that I'm very fond of because I like the quality of their equipment, called Anker, A-N-K-E-R, and they have all kinds of chargers and docks and so on and so forth. That's just one example of one that I have good experiences with, but the docks can add a lot of capability to a MacBook Air or to an iMac or pretty much anything. My Mac Studio, which is a desktop machine and has lots of ports, I went out and got this adapter for it simply because, while it has lots of ports, this thing has things that it didn't know how to do. And all I did was plug it in, and it just transparently started using them.
So are you saying that with your MacBook Air, you get the cable and what you need, you could put that onto, what could you put that onto?
Well, the MacBook Air, if it's a new MacBook Air, it'll have a USB-C cable, which is the connector on the end of it. And if you say you want a USB-C dock, then that will allow you to plug in all different kinds of devices. So you just find the dock that has the connectors that you want and say, okay, I'll get that one. And they're usually some of them are as cheap as $10, but I wouldn't buy those. But they usually run $20 to $50. The $50 ones usually do more complicated things, but you just plug it into your MacBook Air, and the software that it needs is already on the Mac. And you just plug in SD cards, like these little flat memory cards, or USB sticks like this, or other monitors. Or this is an old Microsoft mouse that I bought, probably 20 some years ago. And I have a wireless keyboard and a wireless mouse. And when the wireless mouse dies and I want to use my computer, this USB mouse with a cable, I plug into my dock. And at that point, it allows me to use this 20-year-old mouse on my relatively new computer, even though my computer was never designed to use that 20-year-old mouse. It just works because the software is already built into the Mac operating system. You don't have to install a driver or anything.
Can you use a TV screen as a monitor?
For a TV screen, it's a little bit more complicated because TV screens are designed for TV signals. If it has, the answer is yes. Right now we're using our TV as a monitor, but I'm doing that through an Apple TV, which is a black little pocky puck thing. And it's being mirrored there so that Kathleen and my daughter can watch what it is that we're doing. That's the elegant way to do it. But many TVs do have an HDMI output, and if you plug it in, you can use a TV screen as a monitor. I will tell you, though, that unless you have a really long HDMI cable, you're going to be way too close to the TV for it to use it comfortably, because it's sort of like being in the front row of a movie theater. It'll just be blasting you. So you need, like, if you're going to use a TV screen, you need something like a 15-foot HDMI cable if you're going to use it as a monitor, because they were not designed for being read at close range. So
another thing, I'm frustrated with Apple's calendar, because they keep adding all this stuff to it, and I want my calendar to be clean. I have enough stuff on there and just put what I want. And I called them up and asked if there was a way to remove some of that, and there isn't. And that's what I was told. Like all these holidays, I said, why don't they make a drop-down list and all of these holidays, all these things they want on there, and you choose what you want on your calendar.
Actually, they do have it that way. Let me share my screen, and I'll show you what I mean.
Oh, that'd be nice, because I have a busy calendar and
okay, I'm bringing up Apple Calendar, and it's got all this stuff on it. But you see over here on the side, here it's U.S. holidays, Kathleen's calendar, Lawrence's holidays, all these things here, and you just turn them off, like these things that have these triangles. Those aren't loading anyway, so I just turn those off. I can turn on and off U.S. holidays and birthdays. I can turn off, if you want to see a lot of things go away, I just turn off Kathleen's calendar, and lots of things went away. Right. But that's what this thing on the side is. These are calendars that your calendar is subscribed to. And if you turn off anything that shows up here, it'll disappear out of your calendar. It's that simple.
But the thing is, like the holidays, it takes them all off. I would just like, the legal holidays. That's the only ones I want on my calendar.
Well, usually for the one for that will be the one that says U.S. holidays. And if that's turned off, they disappear, and that's it.
But I want certain ones on there. See, I want the ones I want on my calendar, and not, it's either or. It's all or nothing. Because if you turn off U.S. holidays, they're all gone. And I want some of them on there because I want to know when that's coming. Certain things are coming up.
Well, here's what you do. You duplicate duplicate that calendar entry for all the ones you want to keep, and then you turn off US holidays, and the only ones that left are the ones you duplicated.
What do you mean duplicate?
You click on the event and you just say duplicate it, and it makes a copy. So that now you have two things that say 4th of July, and one of them you created and the other one came with the US holidays, and then you just delete the US holidays and they go away.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a lot of experience with this.
Yeah, yeah.
Mostly deleting things that Kathleen puts there, but you know.
Oh.
I'm sorry?
That's her computer. I stay away from it.
I don't think they're talking to me. I don't think. Anyway, any other questions? Any other questions?
Does iCloud need an email address?
iCloud needs an email address because your Apple Mail comes from iCloud. iCloud includes Apple Mail, it includes the Apple Calendar, it includes Apple Messages. All of those things are parts of iCloud. So yes, iCloud does require an email.
Okay.
Lawrence, I have a question. I
Yes.
have MacBook Pro, and suddenly one day I lift it up and everything's fine. You see the picture and you close it. Next day you lift it a little. You have to couldn't lift it as far. Get all these staticky lines, but everything's working. I can go to sites, but everything's staticky. I'm like, and finally at the end, I couldn't open the lid at all without going static.
If it's going statically, it's usually because the connector between the computer and the lid is been disconnected or worn or something. If you think about it, the lid is more than just a lid. It's got the screen, it's got the backlighting, but then there are also cables that go from the lid into the body of the computer. And if that computer gets pinched or worn or something breaks, it'll have the effect that you're talking about, where when you open it up, it's all staticky.
Yeah, it kept getting worse. I couldn't open it as much. And finally at the end, I couldn't even peek in it anymore.
Yeah, it needs to be. Yeah, it needs to be repaired or replaced.
Yeah. We're going to replace it. We think we're going to get the
Thank you for that
App-
answer.
MacBook Air 15.
I played with the MacBook Air 15 a couple weeks ago when we were in Seattle. I was at the University Village Apple store, which I'm really, really fond of that because it has a tree growing through it, and it just really appeals to mine.
Where?
Believe it or not, I really went there for the tree. And
That's at the university?
it's at University Village, which is about a mile from the University of Washington campus. And let me see, I did take a picture of the tree. So there it is. I will, now I'll just show you my picture. Here is the tree inside of the University Village Apple Store. It goes up through the ceiling.
Oh, yes. Look at this, Tom.
And they have these glass doors that open so they can go in and water it. But it goes up through the ceiling. And I just think that's super cool. And it's much bigger than when I first saw it. The first saw it was a few weeks after the store opened, and the tree was, I don't know, less than 6 feet high. As you can see, it goes out above the roof now. It's probably a good thing they didn't plant a sequoia.
Right.
By the way, I planted a sequoia in my mother's backyard in Bremerton, Washington, in, I think it was 1968. And that sequoia fills not only her backyard, but the neighbor's backyard, and it goes over the road behind her house. And it's about 150 feet tall. But a sequoia is not like a Douglas fir. Douglas fir, when it gets 150 feet tall, it doesn't occupy as much ground space. This thing, it's about as wide as it is tall, because sequoias are sequoias. And I wanted to go tell the people who live there, could I go in your backyard and look at the tree that I planted? But I'm afraid they'd probably take out their pitchforks and come after me, because it's taking over the entire neighborhood. Didn't really expect that in such a short period of time. But there's a lot of water here, so that sequoia is very happy.
Yes.
Anything else?
When you don't use a site anymore and you have an account, what's the proper way to close that out?
That's an excellent question. You definitely want to close out accounts on sites that you're not using anymore. And the easiest way is to log in, and someplace on that site, there will be a menu option for your account, and go in there and especially if you have a credit card, go and delete your credit card. But then after doing all of that stuff, you want to make sure you delete the credit card first, because the last thing you want to do is to delete your account. Why you want to delete the credit card? Because if someone hacks this account, hacks the site that you're no longer using, they can steal your credit card information, even though you haven't used the account or used the site in a couple of years. The other thing that hackers do, if they can't steal your credit card because you deleted it, they will still spam you. They'll sell your email address that they captured from that site. They'll use that to spam you. They'll sell lists of email addresses. I was offered by a hacker a couple months ago 10 million addresses for $500.
Wow.
So it's not as if.
So delete the credit card first and then close out the account?
And then delete not just close the account, go in there. There should be something to delete the account, because that just gets rid of it out of their database. And it's really important, because people will they'll look. There are two reasons why you want to do this. One is it's a good security measure, but the other one is way too many people reuse passwords. They say, I can't remember all these passwords, so I use the same password for everything. So then they go into an account that has no particular value, like they get cross-stitch patterns from this cross-stitch user groups, and it doesn't cost anything to be a member, but they use the same password that they use for the bank. Somebody breaks in, they steal all the accounts out of it, and then they just go one after another trying them on banks until they get a winner. And since you gave a valid email address and a valid password to this cross-stitch pattern company, when they take the money out of your bank, you don't get it back, because it's a valid transaction from the bank's point of view. You logged in, as far as they can tell, and you took the money out, and there's really no recovery from that. So you definitely want to go out and delete accounts from unused sites. I have one account on an unused site that I keep maintaining, and that's from Yahoo. And I think it's funny, because I keep it because when I contact hackers, I use my Yahoo account because it's not associated with me, and that's the only thing I use it for. But about 6 weeks ago, I got a $67 class action settlement from Yahoo, because Yahoo had not one, but two major breaches. And as part of a class action, they paid out millions of dollars to people. And because I kept that account for no other purpose than to track hackers, I actually benefited from their account being hacked. But I've changed the password on it, so nothing was.
I closed out, let's see. What is the big one that everybody uses to pay with?
PayPal?
Yes. But I just called them up and to close my account. I didn't do anything, and I've always wondered about that.
The best way to do electronic accounts is not to. If you go into a bank, you'll see that the people who run the tellers and so on and so forth have no connection with the IT people. And that's true for things like PayPal and JCPenney's and Sears and so on and so forth. The people you see on the sales floor, the people answering in their telephone banks, they have nothing to do with IT. So there's a good chance that the account on the site is still valid. So I would delete the account. As an example, if you ever use Staples here in Squim, well, Staples isn't here anymore. If you had an online account because you happen to use Staples, Staples isn't here anymore. Go and delete that online account. Penny's isn't here anymore. It's unlikely that you're going to travel to a city nearby that has a Penny's store, so delete that Penny's account. Otherwise, people could hack into it and make use of your good name and credit and other things. So if you're not using it anymore, delete it. Chris, you had a question?
No, I was going to say, Staples does a really good delivery business. You can order stuff online.
Yeah, I realize that Staples does that, and Penny swears they have an online presence, but they're lying. The Pennies, what they can do online is really pathetic. Staples does have an online presence, but it depends on what you used it for. I use Staples to print stuff up for my homeowners association. So when Staples closed out here in town, I deleted that account. And if I want to use their online service, I will create a new account and use that. But you know, the account that I had already was for my homeowners association, and I'm not going to use that, so I deleted it.
Well, Costco and Walmart, and now that Office Depot is gone, I ordered writing implements and things to write on.
Yeah,
from Staples. A couple times.
I wish my favorite writing company had a store in the United States. There was a Japanese store in the Ginza in Tokyo that was 14 stories tall, and it was nothing but writing instruments. I blew half a day there until Kathleen swore that she was going to be dying of hunger if we didn't go someplace else. But everything from brushes, because, you know, calligraphy is big in Japan, to mechanical pencils, a whole floor of nothing but mechanical pencils, just amazing store. And if they had an online presence in the United States, I definitely would be part of that. Even though I can't write anymore, my hands just don't allow that. Any other questions before we turn to the program?
Well, what are the advantages, and are there any disadvantages of hide my email?
Hide my email is good for things that you go to a somebody has a promotion for something. You get a free downloadable whatever if you set up an account with this group, and you want the goodie, but you don't want to be spammed by them. You can't really use a fake email account because a lot of them will check. They'll check to see if the account's valid. With hide my email, what it does is it creates an email that'll work for you. They'll check it and it says it's valid. But if you want to, you just go into Apple Mail and say, anything coming to this address, throw it away. So it's a valid address, but you have the ability to turn it off without affecting your regular mail. It makes essentially an alias. Like, for example, if you make a political donation, it's a good idea to make a political donation and just keep it in your address book, a political donation for such and such. And then if they keep on spamming you after the election, just delete the account and you won't get any more spam from them. It'll still have been a valid donation, a valid email address at the time that you made the donation. But if they keep nagging you after the election, just delete that alias and it goes away and you won't get any more email from them. So that's what I hide my email for. It's supposed to be for vendors and so on and so forth, but it's great for relatives that you're not sure of, and politicians and, you know, whatever. Right. Anything that you're not really sure you want to continue on this relationship. if I thought about it before I left my previous employment, I would have marked all of my former work colleagues that way. And if I decided I really didn't want to hear from them anymore, I'd just delete that and I wouldn't have to worry about it. Actually, they talked to each other. I would have been doomed, but if they hadn't talked to each other, it might have worked. Any other questions? Not very many people tonight. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk about two different topics, which is always a bad idea. I'm going to talk about Apple's event that they had last week where they introduced a bunch of stuff. And I'm going to talk about fonts and font management. And I know way too much about font management. So if at some point you think that you just want me to go to bed, you can tell me. Share. And I'm going to leave the navigation for Keynote up because I'm going to bounce around back and forth. This is what I'm talking about, and you'll notice that I repeated this with several different fonts, and I'll bring that up later. I have a slide I want to show you that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it explains why user groups, what the user groups are for. We do this not because it is easy, but because we thought it would be easy. And that pretty much describes why people use computers. They thought it would make the job easier, and then they found out reality didn't agree with them. Several new books have come out, and I recommend the Take Control books because if you have a question, you can go to their site, pay however much it costs for the book, use our discount code to get a discount on it, download it, and start using it immediately. But yesterday, they introduced Take Control of Sonoma. Sonoma is going to be introduced the last week of this month. It's the new version of the Mac operating system. Take control of iOS 17 and iPad OS 17. Those were released yesterday. So if your iPad or iPhone can take advantage of them, you can download it now and start playing with them. A similar book, but a slightly different focus, is on iOS and iPad OS, privacy and security. The iPad and the iPhone are very, very secure compared to other tablets and phones out there. However, because you physically carry them around, they have vulnerabilities that a desktop machine does not have, just because you carry it around. And this book talks about how to approach security and privacy using a device that's really a full-blown computer that you carry around in your pocket or your purse or knapsack or whatever. And finally, Find My and AirTags. There's a book on Find My and AirTags. Find My is the utility that first came out on the iPhone, but then it came out on the iPad and then eventually on the Mac, that allows you to find things. I use it for finding Kathleen. Is she at church? Is she at Costco? Is she wherever it is? I can find her. And I also use it for my daughter who lives in England. I know that if I can look, and if I see that she's at work, probably don't want to call her. But if she's at home, then I need to check the time. And if she's awake, I can call her. So it has different kind of purposes other than just remotely stalking people. But all of these 4 books just came out this week. And I recommend them if you have questions about any of those topics. At Apple's presentation, the first thing they did, well, the second thing they did was they talked about their clean energy initiative. Apple committed in 2020, 2019, something, several years ago, to have all of their facilities in the United States and their stores in the United States to be carbon neutral by 2030. And they actually finished that last year. They were carbon neutral as of 2022. So 8 years ahead of advance of their thing. They intend to be carbon neutral throughout their entire process, from manufacturing to the supply chain to transportation and everything by 2030. And this is their new logo. So they spent a lot of time talking about that. And the reason why they mentioned that is that a lot of people are reluctant to turn in their old computer because they don't want the old one to end up in a landfill. Well, among other things, Apple has a very good recycling program. A woman gave me, about a month ago, an Apple MacBook Air that she purchased when they first came out. And I tried in vain to get it to do something, and I just couldn't. And I didn't want to throw it in the trash. So what did I do? I contacted Apple online to this website, told them what it was that I had to what I was going to be sending them. They sent me a PDF of a mailing label. I put this MacBook Air into a box, stuck the mailing label on top of it, took it to UPS, and Apple sent it off, and then Apple recycles it. Most of their current devices are made of aluminum and glass, which is eminently recyclable, plus some other stuff that a little bit harder to recycle. So this MacBook Air is going to be next year's iPhone or something. But they spent a lot of time on that. And then because this is an Apple program, they had commercials and a bunch of other things, but a couple of things I was struck by. And I'm going to show you two photos that seem to show the same thing, but I want to show you them for a couple reasons. The new Apple Watches that were released last week have this thing called a double tap. And I have an Apple Watch. And one problem that I've had, if I'm brushing my teeth or somebody calls me and I'm brushing my teeth or something else happens, an alarm goes off or something, I'm brushing my teeth, and to stop the alarm or to answer the phone call, I have to touch the watch, and I'm covered with toothpaste, and I don't want to do that. They introduced this new thing that works only on the new watches, where if you double tap with your fingers, just by tapping a finger and thumb together, it will respond to that alert, and it'll either answer the phone or hang up the phone or start an alarm or stop an alarm. One of the examples that they had is you can set up a timer to take a picture with your iPhone. So you set the iPhone up on a tripod or prop it up against something, go and join the group, and then from 15 feet away, you double tap your fingers and it takes a photograph. So they have many things that they're using this double tap for. And this is a man with a regular Apple Watch Series 9 showing that you double tap. This is a woman showing the double tap gesture, but she's wearing the new Apple Ultra 2. And one of the things I wanted to show you was just the size of the watches. This is a man with the regular watch, and this is a woman with the Ultra. And I'm showing you that because the Ultra really is physically quite a bit larger. And I just thought that's not what Apple thought they were illustrating, but I thought that was worth noting. And here is a woman showing you the new colors of the iPhone. Now, these two look the same to me, and I think it's just the same color once flipped over. But these are the colors of the new iPhone 15 and iPhone Pro. And one of the things you should note is the size. Here's this woman who's probably 5'7", and these things are just huge. It's amazing that they expect people to carry those. The iPhone Pro doesn't work that much differently than the current iPhone 14. It has improvements to the camera and a couple other things, but there are some things worth noting. And one of them is the roadside assistance. If you have an iPhone 15 and you're stuck someplace and there's no cell phone service, you can bring up roadside assistance and the phone will help you hone in on a satellite and send a message. Now, it'll only send a text messages, and you can't call, but text messages use very little bandwidth, very few bytes. So you can send a text message up to this satellite, and you have a choice of text messages. I'm locked out, no fuel or charge, flat tire, vehicle does not start, vehicle stuck. It sends the message plus your GPS location to the 911 people, so that even though you you're stuck someplace and you can't contact them, the satellite will send it to the nearest 911 call center, which I thought was a really cool thing. And this is a standard feature on the iPhone 15 and the iPhone 15 Pro. The other thing that they're using, that, and part of this works with this new chip that they call a YouTube chip, which is funny because 10 years ago, Apple got in trouble because they pushed out an entire volume of the band U2's music to everybody, and people objected to that. And now they've got the entire U2 band stuck in your watch, but really it's not the band, it's just this chip is called a U2. But that same chip also allows them to do this, which as someone who perennially loses Kathleen in Costco, this will tell me where Kathleen is in Costco. And as I get closer, tells me you're 25 feet away and she's to your left and you're right there. So it'll guide me to Kathleen. Now that only works if Kathleen's wearing her watch or her phone, but you know, hey, I'll take it. It also has, and this is not new, but the way in which it works is a little bit different. It has a crash detector. The crash detector came out in the iPhone 14, I think, where if your car is in a crash and you don't respond in a certain amount of time, it'll automatically call 911. And it's not just for car crashes. A guy fell off. The first time this was ever used was a guy fell off a trail in the Olympic National Park last year, and his phone called 911. And this similar feature has been in the Apple Watch for a couple years now. And the first time that was ever used, a guy fell off a trail near Snoqualmie, and his watch, he was unconscious. His watch called 911 and led the rescuers to it. So that's in the iPhone 15 Pro. This contact posters are on the iPhone 15 Pro, but if you download the new iPhone operating system, works there too. When someone calls, you can have a contact poster. You go into your contacts on your phone and you say you want a poster and find some photograph or something of the person that represents them. And that way, when they call, you don't get just their name. You actually get the whole screen turns into a poster for that person. And I tried it out and it works really quite nicely. And if you don't like someone, you can have a picture of a donkey or something. It just depends upon your sense of humor. The new iPhone 15 has a USB-C connector. It doesn't use a lightning charger anymore. So it's a USB-C connector here. And there's a new version of the AirPods that has a USB-C connector. So if you wanted to, you could actually recharge your AirPods using your iPhone. Exactly why you'd want to do that, I don't know, but you could if you wanted to. And this was an illustration for that. And this is what the iPhone 15 looks like in the front, and on the back, it looks like that. And the camera is the big selling point. This is the iPhone 15 in night mode, which means that it's just using available light. And this is just choosing available light, no artificial lighting at all. And that's just a stunning photograph. And it also can take photographs with the lenses can be up to 48 megapixels. And this is just a stunning 48 megapixel photograph. You can zoom in, you can actually see the shingles on these houses down here. So it's just a phenomenal picture. Now, the downside is that a 48 megapixel image uses up a lot more storage than 12 megapixels that the iPhone used just a couple of years ago. And accordingly, the minimum size of the amount of memory, amount of storage that you can get, I think is 128 gigs or something. I don't remember. Believe it or not, I didn't pay attention. But you can get up to a terabyte of storage in an iPhone 15. And then this is the iPhone 15 Pro. The Pro comes in a different selection of colors, but because it has to. Whereas the iPhone 15 is based on an aluminum case, these are titanium. And Apple came up with a process to actually impregnate the titanium with the color. They had some titanium things a couple years ago, and people complained that the color scratched off. And so Apple is actually embedding the titanium in the covering. And it has 3 cameras. And this third camera is quite special. The current, the iPhone 14 and 15, the regular ones, have up to a 2x zoom. This one has up to a 5x zoom, but it doesn't stick out any more than the other ones. And the way that Apple did this is it's got a pentaprism. There's a prism inside that actually bounces the light around inside to give it a longer focal length, because you really can't have much of a magnification unless you have a longer focal length. And they pulled off this trick by having the light bounce around using these prisms inside of the camera itself, which is really
Hey,
quite.
Lawrence,
Yes.
I believe that you can't get the 5x zoom out of it unless you get the Pro Max. The regular Pro only gives you 3. At least that's what I thought they said. I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time.
You might be right. I'm not sure, but anyway, that
Just throw that in.
yeah, as a photographer, that definitely caught my eye though, because the best pictures you take are by the ones with camera that you actually have. So
Yep.
and this is a picture of the iPhone 15 using Smart HDR. What HDR is, it's a methodology of you stacking photographs. So this is using available light to take this photograph of this woman on a polished floor, and it takes 3 or more photographs, and then it compresses them so that parts that would be overexposed are now properly exposed, and parts that be underexposed would now properly exposed. So this is what you can do with the HDR. And I can guarantee you that with my current iPhone, I could not take a photograph like this. So that's quite stunning. And this is with the iPhone 15 in night mode, using both a night mode and portrait mode. So the portrait mode blurs out the background and focuses us just on the subject here. And again, this is available light. There's no spotlight or anything shining on her. So just a stunning capability. I can't promise to take photographs this good, but I certainly would give it a shot. So these are the kinds of things that Apple introduced. In addition to these products, they also the phones, the watch, and the AirPod with the USB-C. They also had an upgrade to the iCloud. The iCloud used to top off at like 256 gigabytes or 200 gigs, something like that. And now it also comes in 1 terabyte, 6 terabyte, and 12 terabytes of cloud storage. So if you wanted to, you could take everything on your hard drives that you have and just shove it up to the cloud. The good news, bad news is that we do live in Squim or on the Olympic Peninsula, and upload speed is terrible. So it might take you 5-10 years to shove that much stuff up there. But they looked at what people were doing with their phones, and they decided that, you know, people are going to want more cloud storage. I use my clouds, Kathleen and I use our cloud storage to share stuff with our daughter in England. And it's the fastest, cheapest way to get photographs to England. We just stick it up there and she can grab it. So that's what they talked about. And now I'm going to talk about fonts.
Lawrence, one more thing about the camera and the 5 times. Do you have control on that? Like if you were like that shot of the valley, you could bring it, you can control it like you would a real camera with going in and out, you know, like
when it has those multiple magnifications, it shows those on the screen. So on the regular camera, there are 3 different magnifications. So there's a wide angle, there's the regular, and then there's a 3x zoom. And you just select which one you want, and it reframes it.
okay.
And that works the same way on the 15 Pro Max phones as well. you just select only, you have 4 selections instead of 3.
We wa-
And
We ordered the Pro Max, and they're coming out in November. And if you remember, we're the ones that still were using the 6S Plus.
oh yes, you definitely need an upgrade. The cameras have a lot of other things that I didn't tell you about. Like, for example, on the Pro Max, you can also adjust the focus after the fact. You take the photograph and then you decided that there's one subject in front and one behind. You want it to focus on the one behind. Instead, you just touch it and it'll focus on the one behind. I have no idea how it does that, but I was definitely intrigued. And the video on it is phenomenal, but I really can't show you video with a phone that I don't have. So I just showed you these slides. And to fonts. The word font, spelled this way, can mean both a place for holding water or the lettering that you use on a typewriter or something else. And the word itself is from the French word meaning to melt. And it has the same root word that's used in fondue. In fondue, you melt cheese and then you dip bread into it. And with a font, it's associated with melting, because fonts used to be, they were originally wood, carved wood, but they quickly gave way to lead. And the reason why they used lead for lettering was that lead was it's more malleable and easier to melt than almost any other metal. So that's why it's called a font. It's from the French word. And these are all the different ways in which you can use the word font. But there are a lot of different reasons for using different fonts. And the reason why is because of this word, meaning to write. And I know you can't actually read these slides, but I'm going to put the slides on the website so you can see what it is. This was done with a program that I have on my iPad, one of my favorite applications. It's called WordFlex, and it has the Oxford English Dictionary on it. And when you type in a word, you can then click on it and it expands it out in these word clouds, showing how different types of different ways in which a word can be used, different definitions it has depending upon context. It also includes vulgarities. There's a word that I'm not going to show you that has this tremendous cloud that goes out in all directions, because you can use that word as a subject, verb, adjective, adverb, almost anything you can think of in English. And if you ever want to see how that's done, just go talk to a U.S. Marine. But there are just lots of different things that you can do when you're writing. And because of the different things you can do when you're writing, that's why we have so many different fonts. And this next screen shows you the reading speed with different types of fonts. The fastest reading speed, and this was done upon thousands of tests, if the text is done in Garamond, people can read up to 312 words a minute. Same people using Oswald 295, so on and so forth. And then you'll notice that down at the bottom, and I've got something in the way so I can't read it, Open Sans 254 words per minute. So you can see there's a fair amount of difference there in terms of the reading speed. You'll notice that Avant-Garde, which is what a lot of computers come up in as the default, is one of the slowest ones to read by. Not included in here is Courier, which is even slower. But there's a reason why Courier is famous anyway. And Times, which was originally developed for the London Times, you'll notice is up at the top. But the reason why Times was developed was to cram as much ink on the page as possible and using the fewest number of sheets, the most words on the page as possible using the fewest number of sheets. And that's because early newspapers, the principal expense was the paper and the ink. So the more you could stick on one page, the better. And Times was developed to have readable type that was good at a small level. Garamond, by the way, is one of the best fonts to use with a inkjet printer, because it uses the least amount of ink at a given size of any other piece of text, for reasons that I'm not going to go into right now. And this is my opening slide telling you about Strait Macintosh user group. This top one, the font I used was Hiroshige. Hiroshige is a serif font. Serif are these little tail things that you see on things. But Hiroshige was designed so that the little tails look like brushstroke. And it was invented for a book on the Japanese painter Hiroshige. So that's where Hiroshige came. It's one of my favorite fonts. I use it for everything. Arial Black, people use it in signage all the time. And it's a sans serif. It doesn't have little tails on it. It doesn't have those little flourishes. And Helvetica is another sans serif font. It's one of the original fonts used in the IBM Selectric typewriters. Times, as I told you, was developed for the newspaper. Times, again, was also big with IBM Selectric typewriters. And I don't have Courier on here. Should have thrown in Courier. Courier, the original typewriters were monospaced, meaning all the characters are the same width. All of these are proportionally spaced. So if you look up here, where's a good word for this? The T is much narrower than the N, and it's way narrower than the M, and the capital M is even larger. And that's proportionally spaced font. And those are easier for people to read. But the original typewriters, everything was monospaced. All the letters are the same size. That's harder to read, but it was much easier mechanically for the people to figure out how to work that. And you didn't really have proportionally spaced typewriters until the IBM Selectric came along with its little replaceable ball on top of it. Optima is, again, another one that's good for signs, and I liked Optima. Marker Felt is what's called either a novelty font or a specialty font, meaning that it's not designed to look like type, it's designed to look like somebody was drawing on a piece of cardboard or something with a felt tip pen. And Brush Script is one of many script type fonts. Script type fonts are the hardest to read. And if you want proof, just show something written in script to a 12-year-old and they'll have no idea how to read it because they just don't have a lot of practice of that. And most of what I'm going to show in terms of the demonstration portion is going to be about Font Book. And a Font Book has an online manual that I'm going to copy this off and paste it into the chat window. Well, I can't do that right now because I don't have a chat window. I'm going to stop sharing so I can paste it into the chat window. Where's my chat window? This is the online manual for Font Book, which comes on your Mac. You probably never noticed it, but it's in your applications folder, unless you have a really old Mac. But that's what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about is Font Book. And bring my slides up again. Font Book allows you to look at various fonts and do a bunch of other things with it, which is, where am I? There. And one of the things you can do is you can make a font catalog. This is a font catalog that I made with Font Book. And if I had printed this out, this would have been 196 pages. And that's just the fonts that are on my computer. And to show you what I mean by that, I'm going to go to, not that one. I'm going to go to this and when it bothers to show up here. La-dee-dee. I'm going to open these up and says, do you really want to open up 196 things? Yes. If I printed this, it would have been 196 sheets of paper. And each one of them shows you a font, names the font, shows you different characters in that font. And on your Mac, there are Arabic fonts, there are Tamil fonts, there are Indian fonts, There are Japanese fonts, lots and lots and lots of Japanese fonts, and Chinese fonts, lots and lots and lots of fonts. Greek fonts, just an amazing number of fonts on your Mac. And if you printed them all out, it would use up, on my machine, at least, it would use up 196 sheets of paper. I didn't feel like using 196 sheets of paper, so I printed it as a PDF and then put up this sample. You'll notice here that there's even an Apple Braille font, so you can write things in Braille on your Mac. Why would you want to do that? There are Braille typewriters and there are Braille printers, and a lot of blind use Macs, and they will type stuff out and then print it in Braille using their Braille printer. So there's several Braille fonts on your Mac. I also have an attendance form, which I'm going to paste into the chat as well. And so let's stop sharing for a second and paste in the attendance form. I would appreciate it if you fill out the attendance form so I don't have to remember who's here. And then I'll go back to my demonstration. And I'm going to close this up and bring up Font Book. Now, if you don't know where Font Book is, if you just hold down the Command key, press the space bar series, the search bar comes up and you type in Font Book and press return, and it fires up Font Book. And this is an Apple utility, it's on your machine, and it allows you to view various fonts. This particular font, for example, is called a copperplate font. They say it's an engraved font, but the reason why you have lettering like this is that for certain types of things, they wanted a harder metal to print on, and so they etch things in copper. And because they were etching it, they could have things like this shadow to make it look like the sun is on the left and the shadow's on the right, and it makes it look like carved things. Pardon? Oh, lost the screen. I just lost my family because screen sharing went away. Okay. This is what's called the general term for this is called a copperplate type of font. And you see a font that you're interested in, and you just come down here and click on it, and it shows you what it looks like. And it's divided up into terms of things like all fonts, my fonts. My fonts means fonts that you have added to the Mac. There are English fonts. And when I say English and German, it has to do with the languages you've installed. I've installed on my machine English, German, and Japanese because of my academic interests. So the English fonts are basically the ones that came with my Mac that support English. German are the ones that I added because I said that German was one of the things that I wanted, and Japanese because I wanted that. There are fixed length fonts. There are fun fonts, and fun fonts means they don't follow any particular school. There are modern fonts, which again is basically a type of school. Open type fonts, which is the technology that the fonts use. Open type, I'll get into that in a second. PDF fonts, again, is the technology. PostScript is technology. Traditional are ones that are, if you want to make something look old, you can use one of these traditional fonts. TrueType is another technology, and web fonts is another type of technology. But let's go back to all the fonts. That's just what it looks like when it comes up. But you can also click these little buttons up at the top, and you can see different types of presentations. So if I click on this one, which shows two parallel bars, this is how I got that sample, printed sample. I just listed all the fonts and I told it to print them out, and it went crazy. And you can also look at the technical stuff, like, for example, Academy engraved comes in one style, and it's a TrueType font. Adele Sans, whatever. This is an Indian font. It's for the Indian language. Comes in 7 styles, and it's an open type PostScript font. And American Typewriter is a TrueType font. And Apple, this is a Chinese font, is a true type font. All these kinds of fonts on there, this gives you kind of technical details about it. And if you're looking at a font and you'd say, I'd like a closer look at that. Well, there's a bar here that allows you to increase the size on the screen. So you can look at them up close and personal, or you can dial it back to something else. And when you're looking at these samples, you can also type in things in a different way. Let's go back here to all the fonts and go back just to my sample here. It's, that's not what I want. The sample text that it's using, you can actually type something different than what it has, but I'm not in the right mode and I'm not going to worry about it. But that's what, this is what you can use with TrueType. But some things to note is the English fonts, the German fonts, these are Roman fonts. The Japanese font doesn't look terribly Japanese, which when you click on it, still looks like a, depending upon the font. Sometimes it'll come up with a perfectly good alphabet and you think, well, this doesn't look Japanese at all. And that's because they use the encoding pushes the Japanese characters numerically farther down the list. So it's not obvious that some of the Japanese and Chinese characters really are there. Fixed width fonts are used for things if you want all the letters to line up and everything to be exactly the same size. And the traditional one that people might remember from old Macs is Monaco. So Monaco, all of the characters are the same size. But if you've ever used Monaco and you want everything to be the same size, I would recommend to use Menlo, which is a more modern font, and it just looks better than Monaco. There was on the original Mac, there was a font called San Francisco that looked like it was Ransom Note, where every character looked like it was cut out of a different part of the newspaper. There are even TrueType versions of that. So fixed width fonts are good for things like if you're writing computer code, you want a fixed width font. And aside from that, I can't think of too many other uses for it. Fun fonts are for doing posters and you want them to look casual. Modern fonts are for doing things like signage. And traditional are, again, for doing signage that you want it to look a little older. But I want to get now into the types of fonts. OpenType is the technology used for most of the fonts on your Mac. They almost all use OpenType. So if new fonts are added to the Mac, they're almost always going to be in OpenType. And the nice thing about OpenType, as you expand and contract the characters, you don't need multiple sizes. With the original Mac, if you had a 12-point font and then you had a 14-point font, you had to have two complete sets of the font, one in 12-point size, one in 14-point size, another one in 16-point size, and the fonts just took up a staggering amount of memory. And the nice thing about this technology with this new stuff, you can add and shrink it and it's done mathematically. So it doesn't take any, you only install the font once. And OpenType is the current thing that Apple supports the most. PDF fonts are fonts that are installed by Adobe Acrobat in order for Adobe Acrobat to work. And if you don't have Adobe Acrobat, you probably don't have these. PostScript fonts are the original fonts that the Mac had for use on the laser printer. The Apple LaserWriter was the world's first commercial PostScript printer. And PostScript itself was designed by a mathematician who wanted to have a technology for printing mathematical books. And that scientists later on founded Adobe. So if you want to know why Adobe is the way it is today, you can blame a mathematician. And Apple is getting away from PostScript fonts because Adobe is getting away from PostScript fonts, and they're mostly going to OpenType. And TrueType is Apple's first attempt to get away from PostScript. People wanted to do things with their Macs involving type and they didn't want to spend $200 for a set of fonts from Adobe. So Apple came up with TrueType as a way to have scalable fonts that did not require Adobe's proprietary technology. And the OpenType that I was telling you about earlier is essentially the modern version of TrueType. TrueType and OpenType have the same basic origins, and both of them are Apple technology. You knew TrueType was making it in the big time when Windows started using TrueType about 20 years ago. And now Windows uses TrueType and OpenType. And finally, web fonts are special in as much as they're used by websites in order to display things on websites. So if somebody wants to use a different type of font than what is normally available, they'll use a web font. And these web fonts are on my machine because I build websites. So I happen to need some certain types of fonts. But that's just basically what TrueType, what Font Book does by most people. They use it for looking at fonts and examining fonts and seeing variations like the emoji font. You want to see them all in one place. You can scroll through this. But it has another purpose, and it actually has several other purposes. One of them being if you want to check a font to see if it's corrupted. If you have a corrupted font, it can actually crash your computer. You start to open something and it can just crash it, or you open a program and it can crash it. You open up a document and it'll crash. And one thing that people never bother to check is the fonts. But if you select a font and you come over here to the File menu, you can do something, say, Validate File, and it'll go through and Validate File, Validate Selection. That's the one I wanted. And it'll go through and it'll look at that font, and it came up with this little green check mark, which means that that's fine. Well, if you think about it, validating one at a time, if you have a lot of fonts, is just really incredibly annoying. So I'm going to select them all at once, and I come up and say, validate selection. Since they're all selected, it'll validate all of it. And it's actually fairly quick. It may not seem that way, and that's because it doesn't put up a report card until the end of it. If it finds something that is a caution, it'll put up a little orange dot. If it's finding something is corrupted, it'll put up a red dot. And it should have all of mine as green because I like to keep it that way. But that means that all of these fonts that it found are valid. So that's cool. So you can use it to validate fonts. You can remove duplicates. So you say duplicates, and it'll say, there are duplicate fonts on my machine. I can either remove them automatically or manually. So I say manually, and it'll show you the font that I got more than 2 copies of, more than 1 copy of. And it's this Hiroshige font that I told you I liked. And that's because I installed another copy by accident. Did somebody have a question? Okay. I heard something. So you can use it to resolve duplicates, validate fonts. You can export fonts. There's really no reason for you to ever do that. But the other thing you'd use this for is for adding fonts. And I happen to have somewhere on my desktop a folder full of fonts. And I'm going to close the font book and bring up this folder of fonts. And the first one I'm going to look at is American Sign Language. You might think, why would you have a font of American Sign Language? Well, you open this up and it gives you kind of a preview of what it looks like. And it's doing that using Font Book. You notice when I double clicked on it, it just automatically opened up Font Book. And then it gives you a preview showing you the hand symbols it uses. And you say install. And you think, well, what would you use an American Sign Language font for? Type something out in English and then switch the font to American Sign Language, and it'll show you the hand symbols you need to spell that out. It doesn't do words. Most of American Sign Language, there's a symbol, there's a set of hand gestures for a whole concept. So for example, for God, for sunlight, there's the hand gestures just for that. this American Sign Language is just for the alphabet if you want to spell something out. And Lawrence, my first name, has 8 characters, and I am astonished sometimes to see how rapidly a good interpreter can spell out my name. It's really amazing. But that was American Sign Language. And the other one was, I was telling you that I was telling you about Garamond being really cool. Well, Apple has their own kind of Garamond called Apple Garamond, and it's even thinner than the regular Garamond. And if you have an older Mac that had a beige cover in your basement or closet someplace, the word Apple on that Mac is done in Apple Garamond. And it's very narrow, so you can cram a lot of things into a narrow space. The disadvantage of Apple Garamond is a little bit harder to read because it is narrower. And dot matrix, if you really have a hankering for dot matrix printers, you can get a dot matrix font. If you don't like the emojis that you come with your Mac, you can go out and get more emojis. So this shows you, I'm showing you a preview with Font Book, but if you wanted to install one, and let's say I'm going to install Apple Garamond Lite here, I open this up, it shows me this preview, and this little blue button says install, and it installs it. That's all it is. And if you wanted to get rid of one, let me install something so I can get rid of it. I'm going to take this dot matrix one and install that one. Install. I now have a dot matrix font, and to prove this, I'll bring up something to type in, like Word. Come on, open up. And I'm going to duplicate this several times. And I'm going to increase the size so that you can have some chance of being able to see it. And I'm going to change this one to Apple Garamond. And you'll see that it's nice and tight. I'm going to change this one to Courier because I didn't show it earlier and I should have. Now, why is Courier bad? Courier is bad for reading because your eye has to travel the same distance to see the same amount of information, whereas people tend to read by shapes, and the shapes of the characters are much more unique in a proportional font than they are in a monospace font. So if you ever want to torment somebody, just give them something written in Courier. It makes it hard to read. And let's try this one in sign language. Is that sign language? Yeah, that's American Sign Language. Let's blow that up a bit so you can get a better view of it. And what else did I install? Dot matrix. Dot matrix. And this is just in case you really, really loved your dot matrix printer once upon a time. You'll notice that the dot matrix font and the Courier font are both mono fonts, which is another reason to hate dot matrix printers. But that's how I installed them. They weren't on my machine earlier, and now they are. If you want to get rid of them, how do you do that? Well, you go find the font here, and well, I could just search for it. Okay, dot matrix font. I click on it and I say remove, and it removes the font. That's it. So, any questions? When I said I can talk about fonts all day, I wasn't joking. I used to run a newspaper and a couple magazines. Yes.
So if I have old PostScript type 1 fonts, how can I install them on the new Macintosh operating system?
If they are, actually, you do it basically the same way that I did. It'll come with a bundle. You open up the bundle, and actually for PostScript, they're in 2 parts. As I recall, you drag them into FontBook. So you find them on the desktop and you drag them into the FontBook. It's been a long time since I installed the older PostScript fonts. I've pretty much gone over to the open type fonts. If you buy a font from Adobe today, it's going to be an open type font. It's not going to
See, I bought Adobe, all the Garamond family, which included Expert and all that, pretty expensive. I would really love to have that on my machine.
Try and just drag them on top of FontBook. So have FontBook open, grab the files and drag it on top of FontBook. And there's a 80% chance that it'll work. And if it doesn't, then it just took you a couple minutes to find out.
Okay.
And then if all else fails, I would just go shopping for fonts. One font that cost me $200 several years ago, I recently got for $25. The price of fonts has gone down immensely after OpenType was produced, because it doesn't require that you buy a license from Adobe and buy the utilities from Adobe and so on and so forth to make it. So the price of fonts has plummeted. You can go on to, I'm not saying I recommend this, but you can go on to the Apple Store and just type in fonts in the Apple Store, and you can get like 1,000 fonts for $59. I'm not recommending that, because of those 1,000 fonts, there are probably 50 that are useful, but the price of fonts is plummeted, so that the font foundries, they still call them foundries, have had to make money in different ways. But I would just try dragging them. Do be aware that the Adobe Type 1 fonts, which are the ones that Adobe used to sell, Adobe is going to stop supporting either late this year or next year, or sometime fairly quick. They just announced that they're basically getting rid of that. They're abandoning that technology. And that's kind of interesting, because the Apple screen to this day is drawn in something called display PostScript. So when I resize my Zoom window, this is being translated back and forth to PostScript by the processor on the fly. And I don't know what's going to happen if Adobe abandons that. I don't think Apple's going to be the least bit concerned, aside from the fact they won't have to pay royalties to Adobe anymore. But,
Lawrence,
yes.
this is sort of related to the session, but only to me. I was trying to make my earpods available so I could, not have you talking into the room, because my husband was doing something else. And so I went to my iPhone and I asked my iPhone to Zoom. And this is what's happened to my phone, and I can't unlock it because I can't make it smaller. The iPhone thought Zoom meant to make something.
Yeah, just hold down on the if you're looking at the phone, hold down on the right side button, and eventually you'll see a bar come up and say offered to either call SOS, call 911, or turn your phone off, and just slide to turn your phone off.
Calling emergency services.
Nope, you don't want that button.
Okay, so okay. If I do, that's what happened. I did try that. I tried to turn the phone off. Okay, slide to find, slide it. It won't.
No, not the SOS. It'll be above the. Oh,
right
I see.
Here, I can't.
That's an interesting problem.
And
Hold
I
on.
can't unlock it because the numbers won't move around.
Hold on the side button and say, tell Siri to turn the phone off, and see if that works.
Hey Siri, but
Here's what I found.
Actually,
Okay.
that's good because that's a screen now that you can flip up and get out of the way. You should be able to turn it off now just by holding down the side button because it's not on the Zoom screen. Other questions?
Well, it's not going off.
It's not going off.
No.
Talk to Siri again when the screen comes up. While the Siri screen is up, turn it off.
Hey, and not push anything?
Push it on the side and ask Siri a question, and then when
Hey,
no
Siri?
matter what the answer is, hold down the button to turn it off.
Hey, Siri?
I'm here.
I've got that now.
Well, no, you actually have to tell it to do something. Hey Siri, who won the?
Hey, Siri?
What
Hi
time is it?
there.
Hey, Siri, turn my phone off.
Just
No, I
hold down the side button until it prompts you to turn it off. Keep on holding it down, and it should prompt you to turn it off. Oh, you want to hold down the right side button.
Both of them?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, you can hold down the top one on the left and the right side button, and it should come up with a bar that tells you to offers to turn it off. Yes. After the meeting, I'll help you with that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
This is off the subject, but can anyone out of the area join our group
Yes.
from anywhere, like California?
Yes. We had last year a guy from Australia called in all the time.
Oh, okay.
He
Okay.
was eating breakfast while we were having our meetings.
Okay.
I was wondering because it was dark outside and he's obviously on a patio and it's light streaming around. But he used to live in the area and he moved to Australia, so he called in
Okay.
all the time.
Right.
Other questions?
Let's see. There's so many.
I'm not going to ask what we're going to do next month because I already know. Between now and then, Sonoma should come out, and I'll have had time to play around with the new iOS and iPad OS, so we'll probably be talking about that.
I think
Ha-
you would-
Has anyone signed the sign-in sheet?
Oh,
If you haven't, you should go do that.
How do you do that?
The link is in the chat window. And if you don't see the chat window, down at the bottom of your Zoom
see
screen, there's a.
Okay, I see it. And
I don't see the chat window.
That's it there.
so
Where?
just,
That white streak in?
The one that said forms is the sign-in sheet.
one that says forms, okay.
What's it?
Chat.
Yeah.
There. Okay. To everyone. Type here. All right. How do you sign in?
You just click on that and a form will pop up and tell you what to do.
Click on what?
On that link that says https forms.gle, you click on that and a form will come up in your browser.
Down there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Participant.
Any other questions?
Lawrence, I have one for you. Specifically, I mean, we talked about photo pills before. They sent me a digital book about how to operate their software. And it's like 200 pages, but it's digital. Who cares? Is that something that you would be interested in to see more about what it is?
Yeah, it would be, because I just don't know if it is useful to me, and I didn't want to spend the money to find out.
Exactly. So which email address, or should I text it
Just
to
send
you?
it
or-
to Straight Mac Vice President email address.
Try to help me.
Okay. Okay, I can do that.
Well, the Hoskins are here, but the Hoskins don't know how to sign in.
It should just bring in up a form in your browser. If you double click on the link,
What link are you talking about?
the one that's in the chat window.
In the chat window.
Yes.
At the bottom,
It says to everyone, type message here.
Oh, you don't see anything in the chat window?
Invite, mute me.
Meeting
No,
chat.
no. There's a button on the bottom that says chat, and that'll bring up a panel on the right of your screen. And that's where you can send me written messages, or I can send you things.
Yeah, I clicked on chat and I have the chat window. So where do I sign in? On the window.
There is a link. It's text on the screen that says to everyone, or me to everyone, or Lawrence,
Yes.
whoever
To
thinks I
everyone.
am.
To everyone.
And in that window, not down at the bottom, up at the top, there should be links, and you just click on one of those links.
And there's like 4 of them up there.
Yeah, and 3 of them are identical. Click on one of the identical ones, and it'll bring up a form.
Do you have any idea what he's talking about?
If you have the chat window open, it should be at the top of that.
And
It'll
then
be on the right,
says,
right-hand side of your screen.
Right? Says meeting chat.
Yes, and there should be 4 messages in there.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Then what? Click on which one of the messages.
The 3 that are identical, pick on any one of those, and it'll open your browser and allow you to fill out the form.
Click
Okay.
on this, Bonita. Can't
What?
go wrong.
Click on everything. Page you're looking for cannot be found. Forms.
You see the form?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yay.
It says forms. Okay.
yes. And at a future event, I'm probably going to use those for a drawing. I have some stuff I'm going to give you. I have 2 Apple TVs, not the current model, to give away, and some cases to put drives in so that you can back stuff up and things like that. Anything else tonight? If you ever want to know a great deal about typography on the Mac, there is an older book that I highly recommend, and you should be able to find it on Amazon, and if not, you can probably find it on someplace, called A Mac is Not a Typewriter. It was written by Robin Williams, not the comedian. This is a woman. And she also has another book on, I can't remember the name of the other book off the top of my head, but A Mac is Not a Typewriter basically tells you how to take advantage of the fact that a Mac can put things up on the screen proportionally, and why you should not double space after a period or comma or any other kind of punctuation at all. Really excellent book. She has it doesn't sound like a textbook at all. She has a very wonderful presentation style, and depending upon which edition of it that you find, you'll even see a short blurb on the cover that I wrote when I wrote a review of it. That's one of the things I used to do, is I used to write reviews of books, and so her publisher stuck it on the outside. I met her at a computer show, and she said, I have this for you, and she handed me a copy of her book, and she said, and I said, I already have this, and she says, you don't have one like this, and it had my name on the cover, which is kind of cool. But it's a really good book, and it's, when I say it's a book, it's like 94 pages. It's not a deep read, But it tells you all about the history and the science of putting type onto a piece of paper. And after just reading that for a few pages, you should get sucked into it. It's really quite a fascinating story. Anything else? Okay, then in October, we will talk about Sonoma and Mac OS, iOS 17 and iPad 17. Speaking of which, Apple does not usually have big sales of their computers at the end of the year, like a lot of other people. But if you do decide that you want to upgrade your computer, with the new Apple Silicon machines, there are really only three things to look at. Is how many ports do you want? The Apple Studio and the iMac and the MacBook Pros have more ports, so you can plug more things into them than the MacBook Air. A MacBook Air has a limited number of ports. The Mac Mini has all the power of the iMac, but it's a smaller. Actually, it even has more power than the iMac. Plus, you can put any size screen you want on it. So if you have a Mac Mini with the M2 chip on it, it'll just blow away what the iMac can do, and you can put an even larger monitor on it. So how many ports you want? That's one thing. The second thing is you want at least 16 gigs of RAM. You don't really need to have 32 or 64 unless you're a programmer or designer or something strange. 16 gigs is more than enough for most people, but 8 is probably too little. And the third thing you want is how much storage. You can get some models that have as little as 128 gig drive. That's way too small. You should have at least probably a ½ terabyte, which is 500 gigs, or a terabyte drive. And those are really the only things you need to make sure. Have at least 16 gigs of RAM, have at least ½ terabyte drive, and how many ports do you want? It is more expensive to get a portable machine than a desktop machine, because portable machines, they have to cram the same amount of electronics into a smaller space, and it just costs more money, and you're more likely to break it. So if you can get by with an Apple Studio or a Mac Mini or an iMac, by all means do so. So a lot of people say, I don't have much space, or I got a MacBook. I hate to tell you this, a MacBook takes up more space on a desk than an iMac does. It's just, it doesn't seem intuitive, but that's what happens. So you might, if you're thinking about buying a machine, Best Buy has sales on these, Costco has sales on these, but Costco usually only has the minimum amount of memory and storage. And Apple has sales, and you can order it from Apple's website, and they'll deliver it to your doorstep really quick. So you just might want to think about that over the next month or two if you're looking for a new machine. Anything else? I shall see you next week. Next
Thank
month.
you.
Next week is too soon. Next month. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.